Well, g'day, and welcome to today's episode of Beyond at Home. We're tackling this question of who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? We create so many different versions of Jesus. For a lot of us, our version of Jesus is something we've gotten from our experience with Christians. He's either really loving, really generous, really compassionate, or maybe your version of Jesus simply suits your circumstances right now, your mood, how you're feeling, the things you want in life, the vision and the future that you want for yourself. Who is Jesus? This is a question we have to wrestle with first before we wrestle with today's big question in this episode of Beyond at Home. What is the problem of following Jesus? When Jesus talks about people following him, he uses the word disciple. And disciple in its original kind of Greek term means mathetes, where we get the word math from. And a disciple, really, using this word of mathetes, what it means is to be a learner, to be a student, to be a pupil. So what Jesus is calling his followers to do is to be a learner. And I know for a lot of us, maybe even for you, you've had an experience with Christianity before that's left a sour taste in your mouth based off your experience with a Christian. Crazy thing is that Jesus never called his followers to be Christians. He called them to be disciples. He called them to be learners, to be students, to be pupils. And I think this is just such a much more narrower definition. This has a heavier weight to it. And this is what Jesus was trying to talk to his followers about. He was saying that you were to be a student, a pupil, and a learner. You see, in the first century when Jesus was walking around, he had a crowd of people around him one day. And he's like, I'm going to make it really clear as to what it means to follow me. And you see, in this crowd of people in the first century time, people had so many different versions of Jesus, almost just as many as we do today. Some saw him just as this guru, as this revolutionary or visionary figure, but some people actually wanted something out of who Jesus was. They saw Jesus as their political savior, as their ticket to fame. They saw Jesus as this person they wanted to follow, but at the same time, they wanted to live their own lifestyle. So Jesus makes it really clear. He gives the lay of the land that if you want to be a follower of me, this is what you have to do. This is what you must do. And he also mentions this is what it will cost you. So a little bit of a disclaimer. What we're going to jump into now, I'll give you a little bit of a tour guide as to this conversation that Jesus had with this crowd of people. But the disclaimer is this: if you're an unchurched person, if you come from a background or anything where you push back to faith, if you're not someone who would call yourself a follower of Jesus, you can just sit in today and listen in. I think there'll still be something in it for you. But if you're a follower of Jesus, we have to get our notepad and pen out today, because this is the 101 of following Jesus. This is what we have to do. This is what we must do. This is what Jesus says. Here we go. Then you must. You must. He gives a really clear action. He says you must deny yourself. And see, the culture that we live in kind of pushes us to go out into the world, to go search and find your true self, to pamper yourself, put yourself first, go and find out who you really are by just going out into the world. But Jesus' message is so cultural to the society that we live in. He's saying self-denial, self-forgetfulness first. He's saying this isn't a me-centered faith. This is an others-centered faith, but it's centered around me. This is really odd for us to think about, but when we look at our own life, if we place ourselves as the hero to our own story, as the rescuer to our own anxiousness, to the times of times when we feel really lost, if we place ourselves at the savior of trying to rescue ourselves, then we're making ourselves our own savior. Jesus is asking us this question when he says to deny ourselves of, can we really save ourselves? Because if we can't be our own savior, then who or what can? Jesus says, deny yourself, self-forgetfulness, self-denial. Place me not just as a teacher and just as this rule of principle in your own life, but at the center of your own life. He says, this is the action, deny yourself. And then he goes on. He goes on to say, deny yourself. Then he gives us a behavior. He says, take up your cross. In the first century, the Roman state, the Roman Empire ruled by Caesar, wanted to make it clear that they were like the authority of the world. Caesar wanted to make himself known as Lord. There was actually a day in history where 6,000 followers of Jesus were crucified on crosses over 100-mile-meter stretch just to show to the world that Caesar was Lord. See, when Jesus talks about taking up your cross daily, what he's saying is when it comes to discipleship, when it comes to following him, the bar, the standard is not set at this low and comfortable level. He's saying in your life, you will endure pain and suffering. You won't be getting the worldly rewards that the people around you of the world just always want. He's saying this will actually grow you in resilience. It will grow you in a resilient faith. He was showing to followers of Jesus. He shows to us who are followers of Jesus today that this is how you're to shape your life. It's crazy to think that when we look across the timeline of history, that since the time of Jesus, there's been around 75 million martyrs of the Christian faith. 45 million of those martyrs, from what we recorded, have happened just within the last 100 years across the 20th century onwards. And that's unreal. But when we look at the world that we live in, there are 345 million people every day who are at risk of losing their life simply by saying the words of I believe in Jesus, followers of Jesus who at any stage could be pulled out of their homes, their loved ones, something could happen to them. They could lose their life because of their faith. But this is what Jesus is saying. He's like, this is what you need to do daily. Pick up your cross. You have to be prepared to die for what you believe in. And this is crazy. It's radical. But also, this is the mission of God. You see, it's crazy for us to think in our Western world that God would actually want his mission, his good news to advance into history, even at the cost of the lives of those that he loves. This is something you wouldn't think would be hidden in the Bible, and yet these are literally the words that Jesus says to this crowd of people shortly after the words and the conversation we're having right now. He says, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. Jesus is saying discipleship is about obedience. And the essence of being a follower of Jesus is in this invitation of if anyone wants to be a follower of me, Jesus is saying, you need to deny yourself, take up your cross daily. And then he says, you need to follow me. Is that as smooth? I grazed my arm a little bit. I might need a Band-Aid. See, Jesus could have given us a whole bunch of kind of doctrine write-outs. He could have given us a full paper manual as to how to think our way into Christianity, but he doesn't. He says, follow me. He says, you need to live your way in. He says, follow me. And unlike Hinduism or Judaism or Islam, we're not just looking at Jesus or reading about him just in ancient texts. We're turning to a living and a present person today who's in our life, who asked us to follow him. Jesus in his life, even when it came to being with his 12 disciples, his original dirty dozen, Jesus did every day with them for 3 years in proximity and present with them. He did every day with them. This is a habit. Follow me. So what does it look like to follow Jesus today? Well, let's start with a question that we can all answer. What version of Jesus do you follow? Is it spiritual guru Jesus? Is it revolutionary, religious, political leader Jesus? Is it visionary Jesus? Is it Jesus who's just a lunatic, the massive liar? Or is it Jesus who is Lord? What version of Jesus do you follow? Even if you wouldn't call yourself a follower of Jesus, I want to invite you this week to take on the challenge of writing this down. What version of Jesus do you follow? Because the magnitude and the significance of what Jesus says to this crowd is that if he is indeed Lord, then he's set the bar pretty high in terms of what it means to live a life following him. If you're a church person, if you're someone who's a follower of Jesus, a Christian, and you're kind of thinking after listening in this morning, like, yep, this is just reminding me that I have everything down pat. I know where I'm going. I feel steady. Everything feels good. That's great. I just want to kind of have your attention just for one more minute, because with that, when we kind of look at marriage, or when we look at a wedding day, the most important day of your marriage isn't the first day, it's the last day. Just like it is when it comes to following Jesus, the most important day of your relationship of following Jesus isn't the first day, it's the last day. The first day of marriage, the actual event, there's the words of till death do us part. It's not just I've got there, everything's good now, I've made it, it's a big day of celebration. But when you think of that last day, when you can look back and say, like, this is how I served the person that I love. This is how I spoke with words of love. This is how I was generous. This is how I showed compassion. It's the last day that's most important, because it's the process. It's this process of becoming. And yeah, there's challenges, there's hurdles along the way. When it comes to following Jesus isn't just this one-off prayer. Again, that's the first step. It's not just an event. It doesn't happen in the space of a day. It happens over time. It's a process of becoming. which is why if you're someone who's kind of been interested in what this journey of being a follower of Jesus even looks like, my encouragement to you, my challenge for you this week is to take the time to follow Jesus. Take the time to step into this process of becoming. Because as you do, you'll get better at denying yourself. As you take the time to follow Jesus, you'll get better at picking up your cross daily. As you take the time to follow Jesus, you'll get better at following him.